school tech accelerator. But currently this program is open collaborating with one of the venture capital ones. So if you have a friend who works in agri-tech and food-tech sectors, please introduce this program. The application deadline is August 19th. So yeah, I can introduce a lot of the mentor program. And other than that, this year as a new initiative, collaborating with the Techstars Ultimates and 500, we launched a new program, investment-based program. So collaborating with the Japanese potential LP investor, a real estate firm, they created a fund in Japan, and they do the investment-based acceleration program. Unfortunately, a deadline, the Techstars and the Ultimates is over, but this initiative continue in 3 years, upcoming 3 years. So maybe you can apply for the next year as well. We also collaborated with tech conferences like a CES, Disrupt, or VivaTech or something like that. And over there, in order to support a marketing in international markets, we just create a Japan pavilion. And you can show your product in the Japan pavilion of the tech conferences. We also have our own big team, and over there, we just promote our upcoming program to apply, or some other services as well. We currently have a lot of the pipeline of the overseas venture capital and CVCs. So we know what kind of startup they are looking for. And some of them are actively interested in the Japanese startup ecosystem. So we sometimes set up the one-to-one meeting between the Japanese entrepreneur and overseas venture capitalist. So if I reach out to some entrepreneur here, by LinkedIn or some forum, yeah, please feel free to, get accepted our offer, because we can sometimes try to get connected between the startup and overseas investor sometimes. Yeah, we also offer a startup information map, this kind of market map. Yeah, that's it. So this is my LinkedIn QR code. So if you would like to know more about our services, please scan my QR code and feel free to contact me. Thank you. All right.
I don't have it.
Okay. Nice. So I just scroll the slide. Okay. This one, right? Oh, it's okay, it's all right. One more. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I literally just arrived yesterday in Japan. Yeah, and I'm still really jet lagged. So sorry for being a little bit out of it. But yeah, anyway, so just a little bit about me. So John Whaley と申します。よろしくお願いします。基礎的に日本に住むことであります。もうずっと25年前でしたね。その IBM 基礎研究所で働いてました。もともとはそれは神奈川県の大和市にありましたけど、今豊洲に越したと思うけどね。はい。And so I lived in Japan for 1 year, a long time ago. This was before I started my PhD. I did my PhD, then I graduated from MIT with my undergrad, then came to Japan for 1 year, worked at IBM Japan, and then started my PhD at Stanford. And then I started my first company while I was a PhD student at Stanford. And then that one eventually got acquired about 10 years later. And then I started my second company. And that one got acquired about 4 years ago. And just started my third company about a year ago. So yeah, and all three of the companies have been in cybersecurity, right? And yeah, and so I'm also on the faculty at Stanford. I teach in the computer science department about generative AI. The class that I taught, it's called CS 224G. G is for generative, like a GPT. And they last quarter, it was the class that had filled up the fastest of any class at Stanford. So within 3 minutes, it was completely full because and this is a very, very hot topic right now. Everybody is very interested in large language models. Yeah, and so I'm lucky enough to be able to teach that, like one of the most popular classes at Stanford. And I also run an accelerator program called Inception Studio that I'll talk to you a little bit more about, that we started about 2 years ago. And we started right around the time. Our first event that we did was about 2 weeks before ChatGPT came out, so our timing was perfect, and we've had a lot of success through that, right? And so it's just through this, through, because being like there in the heart of Silicon Valley, and then also, I've been there now almost 25 years, and teaching at Stanford, and then also running the Inception Studio accelerator. I get a very unique view of like kind of generative AI from the research standpoint, from the kind of practical standpoint, and from the academics and startup and then commercial standpoints, right? So I want to share some of this with you. I think this is an amazing time to go start a company. There's going to be some trillion-dollar company or companies that will be formed this year or next year, like around this time frame. And but there's also a lot of hype right now. It's it's like we're kind of in the bubble. And I would say most of the companies that are formed right now, maybe 97, 98% of them won't go anywhere. I mean, they'll end up just going out of business or acqui-hire or not being successful, right? And so there's a lot of hype, but there's also a lot of very interesting promise. So it is a very exciting time to be working in this space. And so, yeah, I mean, this is like one observation is like now is a really great time to be building and built. I think this is actually the best time to build that I've seen in my lifetime so far, right? Because we're at this very interesting time in history where we have this brand new capability that's called like large language models and generative AI, and these foundational models, right? And no one really fully understands what they are capable of. Like, even the people who are creating the models, they don't even know, like what these models are capable of. But I think almost everyone agrees that these are going to be very, very important, right? And this is a time when there's like really big benefits to being like a builder, like somebody like an engineer who can actually like try to build things. And it's very interesting now like definition of like an engineer has changed, because it used to be an engineer, that means you have to write code, like Python code. Now it's like actually because of prompt engineering, and if you can write just natural language, you can often get the LLM to do very interesting things and actually build software using natural language now. So it's a really, really interesting time to be in this space, right? But the people who have a type of builder gene, like they are interested in doing this type of experimentation and building things, they can explore the edges of the system. They can understand what are the actual capabilities of it, and being fully fluent in this type of technology, it becomes like a superpower, right? This is going to be true for the next few years, right? People who really understand generative AI and how to use those tools and what they're good for and things that they're not good for, it's going to give a great advantage compared to people who don't, right? And I see this already. There's many startup companies that this startup company may be like 3 or 4 people, but they can act like a company which is much, much larger because they're fully embracing these type of generative AI tools, right? But there's not really any books yet or courses or anything like that which really cover this. And because the space moves so quickly, like every week there's some new capabilities, right? And so the best way to learn is to just try to build something real. And when you try to build something real, you're going to explore the edges of the system, and you're going to be able to understand a lot more about how this works, right? And so there's lots of excuses about why you can tell yourself why I should not kind of build now, or why I should not start a company now, right? And it's like, oh well, like there's a lot of tech layoffs that are happening. Like big companies they're kind of cutting their workforces. It's like maybe I don't want to leave my stable job, right? Or sometimes they'll say, oh, Gen AI is very overhyped. There's so many too many startups. Most of them are not going to survive. Okay, it's not a good time to start, right? Or there's not really any kind of really proven successful business model yet. The only business model seems to be like you light a bunch of money on fire, or like you use up a lot of GPUs and spend a lot of money, but like, are you actually going to get the revenue after that? Like, that makes it very risky, right? Or like the incumbents, the big companies like Google and Meta, they have way too many advantages because they have access to data, they have access to compute like GPUs, they have distribution, they already have users, all of this, right? And so it makes it so, maybe smaller players can't compete with like the big ones, right? So I mean, the truth is, there's like, these are all those statements there, they're all like partially true. It's, I mean, but and it's true. Most people should not leave their job and try to do a startup, right? Or join an early stage startup, right? But like, if you're very entrepreneurial, if you have ambition, if you have some conviction on some idea that you really want to build, and you're at that kind of life stage where a startup, like doing a startup makes sense, now is a great time. It's probably the best time that I've seen, like, in my lifetime so far. And like the current nature of the technology, the strongest benefits comes to people who can build, like, people who are, either engineers or kind of have an engineering mentality, like, to be able to build things, right? And so the big winners in the future, these are not going to be like, the winning products and the winning ideas. It's not going to come from some big company, like, where there's a market research and focus groups and those type of things. This is not, like, we're in a very disruptive time right now. So like the winners are going to be these kind of AI native companies, the ones that are fully embracing, the AI, really understand the problems, and then are actually able to like come up with very innovative solutions, that are AI native, right? And this is like, because they're going to be reimagining the way that industries work, and like be able to develop like brand new capabilities, right? And then those type of things that are not going to come from big companies. Those are kind of come from startups and people who are going to be very disruptive. Big companies, they have a big companies, they have a huge they already have existing revenues, right? They're not going to do something to cannibalize, to like risk their revenues and so they're naturally, their hands are tied in terms of even be able to be like kind of disruptive the same way that startups can be, right? So it's a great time to build, right? And now, it should be clear, but we're also in this like massive hype cycle. I'm not sure if you've seen this before. This is called like the Gartner hype cycle. You start like with the innovation trigger, goes up to like the peak of like inflated expectations and the trough of disillusionment, and then eventually you kind of like plateau, flatten out. So I'm curious, like where people think we are on this curve right now. So some people maybe they think we're here. We're still on the way up. There's a long way to go. Like this, right? I don't really think so. I think we're probably somewhere around here or maybe here, somewhere here, right? Maybe we're at the peak. Maybe we're a little before at the peak. Maybe actually a little bit past the peak. I mean, I've seen kind of like there's some. Obviously, a lot of hype and stuff that's happening, and so I get the sense most of us think, well, we kind of already went past the peak, right? And then the hype around generative AI is just massive. It's so huge. I mean, we have people who in generative AI, like Sam Altman, will say, "Oh, well, we better work on UBI, like universal basic income, because in the near future." People won't need to work anymore because the AI is going to do all of our jobs, right? So I'm not sure if any of you guys have actually tried and used any of these systems or kind of even understand the trajectory of these. You know that there is no possible way that like that is coming anytime soon, right? It's like we're so far away from that. Now that being said, I mean, I think that the promise, so it's impossible. Like the promise that is the things that are being promised, like they will not happen. Like within the next 5 years at least, 5 to 10 years, right? I can say that with absolute certainty. Like it's like we're not going to have a situation where it's like AI is going to take all of our jobs, within the next decade. It's not going to happen, right? But like this is the promise. They said this is going to be the biggest revolution that's ever happened, all this stuff. And then people make the argument, well, this is different. So like, oh, I know in the past every technology followed this curve, but AI is different. We're just going to keep going up and to the right forever, right? It's going to be as an exponent, right? I don't think so. I don't know. I think we're, there is a lot of hype right now. It's people, they're spending huge amounts of money on AI systems, and they're already starting to see the results of like, this doesn't work as well as like was promised. Oh, like we're spending all this money. Where is this going? Like, where's the practical use of this? You're already starting to see some of that. So, and then what that means, the higher the peak here, the worse the crash is going to be. And so this is going to happen at some point. That's the other thing I can say with certainty. I don't know. I think the only thing it's going to follow this pattern. The only thing you don't know is like what is the scale on the x-axis? Is this like on the course of 1 year? Is this the course of 10 years? Is this like when is this going to happen? Right? I don't know. Maybe it could happen. Could happen. This crash could happen this year. It could happen next year. It could happen the year after. I mean, sometime, but it will happen. It will happen. And so you have to be prepared for it. And what that means is that sometime in the not very distant future, it's going to be very, very uncool to be an AI startup founder or to be working in AI. People will be like, oh, another one of those. Like it's kind of like maybe there was a time where it's like Web3 and blockchain was so huge, and then like now not so cool to say like, oh, I'm a Web3 founder, right? Not so cool anymore, right? So because they've already like gone down this slope, right? So this will happen for AI as well because there's a glut. There's way too many startups, and honestly, ones that are not very good. They're not like they don't really have good, strong fundamentals, and they're not going to be successful companies. But they're still getting a lot of money because there's so much hype right now that a lot of not good founders and not good ideas are getting funded. So, and I would not, even if you can, like your goal should not be to get funded. Your goal should be to be like successful in the long term, because you don't want to waste your time and your life on something for 2 to 3 years that is going to is not going to go anywhere. Right. So even if you can raise money, does not mean it's a good idea. And it doesn't mean that you should spend your time on it, because your time is worth a lot more than investors' money, especially now, because there's lots and lots of investors who are like excited about AI. But I talk with and this starts with the LPs, like the limited partners, the ones who give all the funds to the VCs. Like they are saying, oh, I don't want to hear about anything other than AI. Like, I feel really bad about anybody who's trying to start a non-AI company right now. It's really, really hard to do because all the oxygen is being sucked out of the room by AI. And then on the flip side, all you have to do is like you take your not very good business model and you add like, I'm registered an AI domain name, and then suddenly it's like, oh, now you can instantly raise money at like a high valuation. So we're definitely in a very interesting time, right? And so it's a kind of an incredible opportunity. I mean, the next great company, I think, is going to be founded this year or next year. And, and so the real question is like, how do you find the winners? Like, who's going to win in this, right? I mentioned there's like probably 98% of the companies are going to fail and like 2% are going to succeed. So let me see. So I'm going to make a statement. This is like if you're for early stage, like this is not for later stage, like once you have let's say Series B and Series C and those type of things. Those metrics, those are different, right? But for early stage, it's all about the team and the early team, the people have, right? And it's just because the landscape is like changing very quickly. It's highly competitive. Like the AI companies are so early. They don't really have they may like have some data, but like they don't really have any. It's not meaningful yet because the data points are so few. And even if you say, oh, I got some traction, it doesn't really translate into mean that, oh, you're gonna just follow this straight line, it's unlikely to happen, right? And so like for a startup to be successful, then the idea or approach is probably gonna change, right? If you look at Slack, how did Slack become Slack? Well, they tried to build a gaming company, and then they accidentally built Slack, and then now Slack became Slack, right? Or Instagram, right? It's like Instagram used to be like a check-in app where you can kind of go to a location, like and check in, it's usually like Foursquare, like that kind of thing, right? And then they pivoted and they changed, and now it became Instagram, and then obviously became huge, right? So like that's usually the story of a successful startup is usually something like that, right? You start off like going after this problem, and then you end up working on something else. And so given that, like it's the idea is going to change. The other thing I'll say about this is that so I teach this class at Stanford where it's like we have groups of students that form into teams, and then they end up like working on projects, right? And it's amazing how many of those projects in that these are students, these are just kind of undergrads, they come up and it's like, this is exactly the same idea as this startup that just, later on like goes and raises 50 million or $100 million. Exactly the same idea. Like, and this is like, and that's the truth is like, if you say something like, hey, I want you to apply generative AI to, the legal profession, go, whatever, right? There's about 5 ideas that like everyone's going to have the same idea. Like there's nothing really innovative, there's nothing unique about it, right? And so it's like, well, okay, if that's the case, like that's what that means is ideas are so cheap, right? It's easy to come up with ideas. What's going to actually make you successful is execution, and what's going to make you successful is being like very responsive and to what customers say, different opportunities, be able to pivot and change and be agile, right? That's what's going to be, and it's and hustling and getting customers. That's all the stuff that's going to be successful. Your idea is not the thing that's going to make you successful, because I can guarantee, especially in Silicon Valley where it's just like, I don't know, it's like everybody is doing a startup there. It's just like you can go to any random coffee shop and then you will see like at least half the people there are founders or like would-be founders who are like working on their Gen AI startup. Right? It's just like so the ideas are so cheap it's all about the execution, right? And so if you say that, okay, look, it's about the execution, it's about the team that you have, and like what kind of makes a good team in this kind of new AI like renaissance here. So these are like some set of things that like that I've seen that like these are like the traits of successful early stage AI founders, right? Number one is like the people. Like you want to find somebody who's like impressive in some way, right? They have some type of special skill. It's like you meet them and you say, well, this person is an impressive person, right? Because this becomes important because you need to find co-founders, you need to raise money, you need to like get customers, you need to be able to hire people, you have to convince somebody to like quit your job and come work with me, so there has to be something impressive about them, right? They should have some deep expertise. That could either be a domain expertise or about an industry subject matter. It could be around technology, but something you need to have you can't just be shallow across everything. You need to be deep in something to be successful, right? You have to be autodidactic, basically means you can learn by yourself, right? You don't need like somebody to teach you. You can just like, grab the documentation, or you can read that, you can try it out, you can like learn by yourself, and to be naturally curious, right? You have to have like a high magnitude, like kind of high horsepower, like high RPM type of person if you move too slow, it's like you're not going to be successful as a early stage founder, right? You have to be capable of first principles thinking, so you have to not just, let me just follow exactly the pattern that I've seen before. You have to be able to think from first principles and then be able to reinvent things that are new, right? You have to be a good storyteller. You have to be able to convince people, because you have to convince your teammates your co-founders to join you. Your teammates, you have to convince investors to like give you money. You have to convince customers to sign on with you. So like if you don't have a skills as a storyteller and be able to kind of be convincing, you're gonna have a real hard time, right? They should have like raw leadership skills to be able to scale an organization. So, because it's one thing to be successful as like, it's just an individual or, with a small group. To be truly successful, you basically have to have some leadership skills so that you can actually have the organization grow, right? You have to be at the right life stage to be, you're ready to do a startup now, right? Like, for example, if you like just had a new kid, new child or something like that, new baby at home, it's not, it's maybe it's hard to be successful in these cases because like you're not at the right life stage. So you have to be ready to, hey, I have a little bit of savings and like money in the bank, right? I can go without getting a salary for the next 6 months or 12 months, right? Like, or, hey, I'm not, it's, there's, or, or there's a situation where it's like, oh, my family is sick, or like my parents are not well and I need to take care of them and stuff like that. It's going to be really hard to have a successful startup at that time. So you have to be in the right life stage, right? You have to have the right level of ambition. This is like so many times, I see this especially in Japan, where the people think very narrow. They think about like this problem is very small, right? You have to be like, in order for like this type of venture scale, kind of like a startup to work, you have to think big, like, how is this going to be the next Google or the next Meta or have that level of impact, right? And not be like, oh, I could potentially make a sustainable business from this. Like that might be fine, but like you're not going to do this type of tech kind of high growth startup by doing that, right? And then you need a grit and perseverance. You have to like won't give up easily because there's a lot of hard times when you're building a startup. So like you need to have that. And then if you have co-founders, you want to make sure that the co-founders have like complementary skills, but like mutual respect. Because if you have co-founders that are too similar, it's kind of like the way I think about it, it's like the founders at the beginning and then the kind of first set of employees, that's like the gene pool of your company. And you want to think about what DNA do I want to have in my gene pool? And if it's all the same DNA, then you get a bunch of inbreeding and it leads to all sorts of problems. Like, so if your company is all engineers and you have nobody who's ever done sales, knows anything about sales, you're gonna be in trouble, right? On the flip side, if you have all salespeople and no technical people, you're gonna be in trouble, right? Like, and so this is why you need, so you want to have, you want people who have complementary skill sets. Maybe they have a shared vision and they have a, shared, ambition and those type of things, but their skill sets are different. Because, otherwise you run into all these problems where it's like, oh, maybe like the question is, who's in charge of this? Oh, actually, you're both kind of really similar. So like the question of who should be in charge of something becomes a really hard question, right? And so it's much better if there's kind of complementary. You work your co-founders are people who are kind of a little bit different from you, right? And I think this is like statistically shown and proven. There's a book that's called The Founder's Dilemma, and then if you're interested in this, you should definitely read it because like all the best teams, all the most successful teams are ones that are more diverse as well, right? There's also like an interesting data point about like the companies that are like companies with kind of mixed gender on their founding team do better than either companies that are founded either strictly by men or strictly by women. Like so like I think there's a lot of benefits to kind of having diversity in your early team, right? So and then around first principles thinking, just more on that. This is especially true in this world now where kind of GPT is available to everyone, right? And like because all the public information is going to be indexed and incorporated into these latest foundational models. How do you build that differentiation? So it's like first principles thinking. It's basically this is where because everything has changed and everything is new to everyone, right? So if you can fully understand like how the systems work and be able to think from first principles, and you end up like basically you see new opportunities that like other people won't see, right? Because they're caught in their kind of like traditional thinking. If you think from first principles, then you actually are able to come up with truly innovative solutions that like most people won't come up with, and that becomes a true differentiation, right? And not that many people are actually capable of kind of really do a lot of first principles thinking. Okay. And then so it's like, well, okay, also around a company, it's like we're in this new era of AI. It's like all these new capabilities. All the fundamentals of a startup don't change. Like who is your customer, right? It's amazing how many Gen AI companies that I see, like they don't know the answer to that. They don't know how to answer who is the customer, right? What is the burning need problem you're trying to solve for that customer, right? Are they actually willing to pay for it? Like not just, oh, hey, I had this free thing that I downloaded and I tried it out. No. You have to actually, they have to be willing to pay. And there's other ways to pay. I mean, they can be paid with attention. You can pay with, for advertising and those kind of things. But like, how much are they willing to pay? And like, how much are they willing to pay, right? What's the size of the market, right? Okay, I'm solving this problem for these customers. How many of those customers are there in the world, right? And how do you actually identify and reach those customers? What's the messages that resonate with those customers, right? Do you know how to reach them? Do you know where to find them? When you do find them, what's the message that's going to work, right? Is your solution 10 times better than the alternatives? It can't be 10% better. It has to be 10 times better for your company to be successful, right? All these things, none of those things change. Like this is true before Gen AI, this will be true after Gen AI, right? As well. If you don't have good answers to these questions, you're not going to have a successful company. And I think a lot of people, like in the new AI world, they get caught up in the technology, and then they kind of forget about these fundamentals. And so these things have all become very, very important, right? And then I'll talk a little bit about, like, there's some real benefits to kind of being part of a community, or like, there's accelerator programs, or like kind of like founder community startups. There's a lot of benefits from that. And then so this was recently there was a Harvard business school like a report that academic like a study that they did about like, okay, what's startup communities, like founders who are members of a startup community or join the accelerator program, and they end up like just measurably better outcomes there, even when they compare them directly to like the companies that just didn't, they were the same type of company, but they just didn't join, right? Versus ones that did, right? And so they end up typically raise more for investors, more likely to be alive, more likely to be acquired than similar startups who didn't participate. And like as they did the analysis, they called out three very important things that like turned out to be like the most deciding factors about whether like those companies were those founders were successful. Number one is that like kind of getting very rapid, intense feedback. Like the companies that got the founders who got that were typically much more successful than ones that got kind of feedback over a long period of time. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I think that they're think about that is because if you get very rapid, intense feedback, it helps to overcome natural tendencies to resist feedback. Everybody is like, they have their idea, their kind of ego is tied up with it. And so like, if they're already have some plans, they're unlikely to listen to it. But if you get in a very short period of time, you hear a lot of people saying the same thing, that helps to overcome those tendencies, right? And then it makes it easier to compare advice from different sources, and getting it first, it kind of pushes founders to think more abstractly and then see your high level patterns. So this is part of the reasons why they think that getting rapid, intense feedback is better than kind of getting feedback over time. And then also there's this notion of kind of like this kind of friendly sibling rivalry kind of thing, and then support network as well, right? And so when you have regular interactions, like in the structure of some type of accelerator program, then you end up learning from others who face similar challenges. You end up, it kind of gives you subtle pressure to execute because you see like, oh, your other friend or other people like they are doing well, and like they're progressing, and now it's like, oh, I better keep up, right? There, and then also being in that type of peer group, it makes it easier to kind of identify some kind of missed opportunities or bad assumptions that you're making, because you can kind of calibrate with everyone else, right? And end up getting better tactical information. So this is another reason. And then the third reason that they said that these type of programs are helpful is because of deadlines, right? The fact is, if you have a fixed schedule and a tight deadline, allows the founders to be basically you have this trade-off when you're doing a startup between like broad learning and then execution, right? Because you have to do both. If you're just blindly executing and without really thinking about things, then it's like you're losing the forest for the trees. Like that's what ends up happening. If you and so you need to be able to do both, right? But like having those tight deadlines end up like being it allows you to emphasize execution, which is extremely important, but also like achieve like. I got a nice one too.
緊急地震速報。地震が来ます。揺れに備えてください。緊急地震速報。地震が来ます。揺れに備えてください。
How long is the warning before the actual DC?
Yeah, that's true. No
It's
worries.
not-
No worries.
How close? How far away?
It's pretty good.
Oh.
Yeah, like 5 seconds.
Yeah,
It usually gives like
seconds.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Okay.
Seconds.
Go on.
大丈夫です。
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk really briefly around kind of Inception. And yeah, by the way, so we're actually, I'll talk really briefly around kind of what we do with Inception because it's a really different, unique model that is very different than other accelerators, right? And so the traditional accelerators, I'm sure you know kind of many of them, they're not really a great fit for the most talented builders. These are people like serial entrepreneurs, maybe exit founders, or people who have a lot of experience, or they're working with kind of deep domain expertise. Because like those type of founders, they just have different standards. I mean, they care a lot about quality. They are like looking for ideas and co-founders, at the kind of extremely early stage. They don't want to waste time on the kind of like they don't want to waste a lot of time with a low value added program. And they also thrive in the most high pressure environment. So that's like the type of program that we developed is called Inception Studio. We run these in Silicon Valley. We're actually going to do one in Japan now. So we are targeting. We're going to be in Jujitsu in November. We're going to run one of these programs here as kind of it's very much the same style as we currently do in Silicon Valley, right? And we have these really intense like in-person retreats where we basically get a bunch of founders, early stage founders together who want to start companies, and then we kind of go away somewhere for about 3 days, and it's kind of like a hackathon.
アークモニティ防災センターでお知らせします。ただいま、エレベーターの3バンク、5バンク、8バンクのエレベーターが停止しております。防災センターでお知らせします。ただいま、エレベーターの3バンク、5バンク、8バンクが停止しております。
Some elevators are not working, so that's okay. Yeah.
防災絶対でお知らせします。先ほどの地震の影響で3バンク、5バンク、8バンクのエレベーターが停止しておりましたが、ただいま全体復帰を確認しております。先ほどの地震の影響で3バンク、5バンク、8バンクのエレベーターが停止しておりましたが、ただいま全体復帰を確認しております。
Yeah. Okay.
This is the exciting part.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so we run. There's 72-hour long events. They're in person. We basically get a lot of people who want to start companies together, and then we end up actually meeting there and then forming companies. So this has been like a very highly successful program. We've done in Silicon Valley. We've run 12 of them so far. We've had 50 companies form from these events that we've done so far, and now we're going to start to do them in Japan as well, right? And and it's most important is kind of the deadline, right? Because when you go to this event, then it's not just go to this hackathon and have fun, but on the last day we have a lot of investors, and we get all the top tier investors from Silicon Valley, and so the one we're doing in Japan as well, we're going to actually have those Silicon Valley investors on the line, so like they'll be joining the demo day as well. So you get an opportunity to, pitch some of the top investors in Silicon Valley as well as here in Japan. Yeah, and so we're running the first version of this in November. So we can talk a little bit more about that, right? And we designed it very much as kind of like a hackathon, kind of like founder matchmaking, kind of like also early stage startup workshop. And we designed it very intentionally to do that. That's why we go away somewhere, because you want to remove all your distractions. And we try to get a diverse set of people together, and then kind of focus on this super rapid iteration. And it's very high pressure because there's a tight deadline. So, and it allows you to kind of stress test your kind of co-founder relationships and also form really deep bonds, right? So, yeah, and it's been very successful so far. I think it was like we've had 144 founders come through, and they end up raising like $68 million so far, and yeah, and it's like about 1/4 have been women so far, but we're working to kind of get that even higher as well, because you want to get a good diverse set of people. Yeah, and so yeah, and we've had some very good success stories there. I mean, Ventrilo, they basically built it's like an AI kind of QA, like a software testing, and they raised $10 million seed from Andreessen Horowitz. CoFrame is like they basically use AI to automatically build kind of A/B tests for your website. So use Gen AI to create different versions of your website, automatically do A/B testing. So when you're sleeping, like your website is constantly getting better and improving its conversion, right? SynthPop, they're basically building things for AI in healthcare. They raised like 8.2 million so far. Axiom, they're building a foundation model for human biology, right? Light AI, this is another great company that's building AI workforce tools. And then MemZero, this is actually one of the most popular projects on GitHub. They have almost 20,000 GitHub starters, and they just started they just launched a couple of maybe a month ago or so. And so they're doing extremely well as well. So these are all going to be companies that started at Inception. Right? Cool. Yeah. Anyway, so that's just a little bit on Inception, and then like I mentioned, we're going to run one of these in Japan. And so at the end, I'll show like a QR code if you guys are interested. There's a form you can fill out if you might be interested in joining. Right? How are we on time?
We have time.
Good time. Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about, look, we have, what are the, what's the right approach to fine, you have a great founding team, right? And it's like, how is that founding team going to be successful in this new era of generative AI, right? The truth is that everything that's in public, any public data is going to be indexed and crawled and built into foundation models. And so it's going to be easily accessible via GPT-5 or Gemini or any of the foundation models. And what'll happen if you don't have a strong data strategy is that you'll be outcompeted by some tiny team that's using GPT-5. They're just putting some prompts in a GPT-5, and you're going to end up losing to them, right? And so you have to think about quality data and ongoing access to quality data, and think of it as a strategic asset to your company, right? If you are an AI company and you're not thinking about data strategy, I think that you're unlikely to be successful, because that's really the only sustainable competitive edge that you can have in this new AI era, right? Right. And so the winners there, and the best way to do that is to build very strong data feedback loops, right? So as you get more users and you get more, customers using your product, you have a data feedback loop so that your data is getting better and better. So the more users that you have, or the more usage, or the more customers you have, the larger your moat is. That's what you want, right? And then it's not about let me just one time collect some data. Okay, now I have this data. Now this is very unique, because static data, it's going to get old very quickly, and then it's not nearly as useful as ongoing access to data, right? And so there's this saying that many people say is data is the new oil, and the reason they mention that is because it's a very valuable resource, right? So that's true, but there's a big difference there, because oil is a commodity, it doesn't matter like where you get it. It's always like one barrel of oil. It doesn't really matter where it comes from. Like data, like its value comes in its differentiation. The fact, you know, the fact that if you have data which is like differentiated and targeted, that is far more valuable than just kind of generic data, right? And so if you want to build like effective AI systems and do this in a sustainable way, you need unique and high quality data that only you have, that is not going to be part of any foundation model, and it's going to be hard for other people to recreate. That's the only way to really be successful, right? And the interesting thing about data is that you can use data not only in the narrow sense of let me use this to train machine learning models, but you can use it, you know, to basically both offer personalized experiences to, you know, as part of your product, and also make data-driven decisions about, like, you know, when you're deciding. So it's like the winners in this AI era. There's going to be the products that have the best data feedback loop, right? That's just the thing to think about, right? And so, of course, like the fundamentals don't change. Like if you have no users and your product doesn't have good engagement, it doesn't matter. Like you're not going to be able to gather any data, right? So you have to. I mean, the strong data strategy starts with having very strong product and user engagement. If you don't have that, it's like you're kind of fooling yourself. You shouldn't even think about data yet. You should think about like, how do I get strong product and user engagement, right? And because that, you know, you know, because the data that you get, longitudinal data, like the data across a long period of time, that means basically that's some of the most valuable data, because it shows you like how you know, it's hard to gather, and you know, it shows you like what sustained users, like what makes them different than others, right? The ones who churn or the ones that are not successful, right? And yeah, and so to make it sustainable, you have to focus on that kind of long-term value to the user, right? And so you want to make the data feedback loop like inherent in the usage of your product, right? Make it so when your people are using your product, then feedback is seamless. You're not making extra work for them. It's not like, oh, now you use the product, now I'm going to ask you to use these extra steps. Like that, like you want to make it so that, you know, just you're going to naturally capture the feedback seamlessly during the product usage, right? And so you can get more, because otherwise it's not going to end up working, right? You know, it's like, for example, if you include like editing tools within your product, right? So maybe there's a way to, hey, I can generate something and then I can go edit it using some other tool. Well, if you actually include those editing tools in your product, or like sharing collaboration tools directly instead of like through other products, then you can actually get an opportunity to capture that data, and you got to understand how people use it, right? Another thing is like, you want to kind of like take advantage of like users like OCD, and like where they, if you give them the satisfaction of fixing things and then seeing them corrected immediately, they get like a little dopamine hit every time, right? And so you want to have like a situation where you have instant gratification for kind of user corrections, like, or anytime where they're getting anytime they're getting any type of valuable feedback, you wanted them to get some kind of instant gratification, like, you know, something that makes them feel good about the fact they do it, and then they're much more likely to do this, right? You know, it's just, yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of get user feedback and feedback from customers, right? The one interesting one I'll call out is just kind of this qualitative feedback, right? In the past, the only way, if you have a large number of users and a large amount of data, the only way to really like collate that data in a meaningful way is to like ask them questions like, well, from 1 to 5, or like those type of things. And so the problem with those is you lose a lot of the subtleties of, like, you know, not just the what, but the why. And but with LLMs, you actually have the power to be able to have things that are much more kind of qualitative responses that can be written, that can be in natural language, and you can and then you can use the power of LLMs to just summarize even large amounts of that and just extract out the key insights. So that's a new type of technique that's enabled and powered by LLMs, right? Yeah, and so yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Then like I mentioned, you can use LLMs to like enhance feedback quality. You can allow for things like natural follow-up questions, capture subtleties, things like that, improve that understanding of not just the what, but the why, which becomes really important in kind of using this in a way to improve the product, right? Yeah, and then another thing to think about is that a lot of times when people think about product, they think only of the external facing product, like the user interface that their customers are using. The truth is, so most AI native companies, they also have a pretty substantial amount of product, which is not to their end users, but it's used by the internal teams or for data labeling or those sorts of things, right? Data cleaning, that type of stuff, right? And these are really essential for maintaining high quality, high data quality. And so it's often very much worth the investment to invest in these parts of the product as well. Even if it doesn't touch the end user, if you're able to more efficiently label data, clean data, those type of things, those investments typically pay off, right? And then so at my company, we actually devote about equal effort to our internal data labeling tools as we do it to our external product. So it's almost like a 50-50 split there. So yeah, and and then there's a lot of different things you can do. You can kind of use gamification. You try to give immediate feedback. All the little small details matter about these things. Like if you think about once upon a time, there used to be like a spell checking used to be like a separate program that you would run. It would be like you write your whole document and then you would run into the spell checker and it would tell you, oh, here's all the things that you misspelled, right? And then there's this new innovation that was just add a little squiggly line under the part of the text where it's like, oh, there's a misspelling or something wrong there, right? That became like a huge innovation, there, and so that they make a huge difference, right? I guess just the last thing I'll mention about is that data quality. It's not about the quantity; it's about the quality. And so, data from experts is more valuable. The data from novices, from consistent users, is more valuable than inconsistent users. And so, you want to think about not just the amount of data that you have, but what's the quality of that data, and what's the diversity in that data as well. And so, you want to if there's a real danger if you have of all the data you have is only from one type of users, one set of users, it's going to lead you to your models are going to overfit for those, and it's not going to do well, and it's going to also lead you to kind of make some bad choices, right? And then you have to also understand the inherent bias in some of these existing tools. Like if you look at things, even whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these other tools, there's inherent bias in those because they're trained on the entire internet, and so there's a lot of things in there which are not great. And so understanding the fact that those are there, right? Anyway, so I mentioned if you're kind of interested, if any of you guys are interested in Inception Japan, you can scan this QR code or you can just go to this URL and just fill out. There's a little form there to fill out. We're just trying to get our initial set of people who are interested in participating potentially. So.
Thank you for great presentation. Yeah, we have some events during the talk sessions on Earthquake Art. So yeah, I think it's safe, but so if it happens again, so yeah, please stay safe. And so there's an emergency exit, so venue, so yeah, please be careful. And so yeah, let's move on to the Q&A session. So I think we can grab some questions from the audience. Yeah, John will answer so in public. So yeah. そうです。日本語でも大丈夫ですし、自分で英語単発しても大丈夫ですし、もしくは日本語できたら僕がやるかもしれないです。それと日本語です。
話ありがとうございました。ちょっと2点質問したいんですけど、1点目インセプションスタジオさんって結構支援してる会社とかって結構意図的に数絞っているのか、っていうのを比較的公式サイト見たところ、これは設立した会社が27社で、12社VC にから出資受けた話が書いてありましたので、一方、アンドレス・ヤポドリッツのスピードラン、ゲームスピードランっていうアクセラ、あれ、今開催している3回目の大体1、2回目だけでも、すでに AI 関連のスタートアップ30社ぐらい採択されて全部出資受けたりとかしてるんですよね。だから、それって独自の選定基準から量や物質 をさらになんか絞った結果、その数少なくなってるのか、それかまあなんかちょっと非営利で予算とかリソースとか、そういう別の点でちょっと数少なめなのかっていうのをお聞きしたいな。
Yeah, does the Inception Studio intentionally limit the number of companies supported?
So let's think, yeah. So yeah, I think like we want to kind of keep the quality bar very high, and so we have a very limited set because we want to make sure that they're everyone who kind of joins, so we know it's going to be high quality. I think there is we've had quite a few companies that have formed already, but actually many, if you go back to the statistics about this, many of the founders are kind of repeat founders, had successful exits, a lot of experience, and so many of them. Many of these companies we had, I think 50 companies have formed so far, but only 22 have raised. That's because many of them are still early stage and are bootstrapping. Because when you've had a successful exit in the past, or you've kind of been working for 10 or 15 years, you usually have like a cushion there, and you know that the benefit of not involving investors, I guess, early on. So you don't really need to raise money. So like many of them have not ended up raising money. Now the ones who did raise money ended up being very successful in their fundraising. And I think that's because we focus on quality. So if you it's like if you get a great reputation for quality, then it just has this halo effect, right? Once upon a time, Y Combinator was like that, right? It used to be that Y Combinator was like, oh, it's very hard to get into. It's like, oh, there's a halo effect, and so anybody who joined Y Combinator, they can instantly get a lot of interest, right? Now they kind of scaled. Now they have 200, 300, 400 companies every batch. Now they're doing they do it in summer and they do it in fall, and they do a lot of these, and so then they end up the quality has definitely dropped. I mean, this is where I think that people don't talk about it that much, but often among kind of investors, they often talk about this. They say, okay, maybe the recent batches are not as good as the ones in the past because they were they lost their part of that halo effect. But yeah, I think it's by focusing on quality, then all the companies that have formed, they typically will finish their fundraising in 2 to 3 weeks. Their fundraising is done quickly because we want to make sure that they kind of have focus on quality.
わかりました。クオリティにフォーカスしてるってところと、フェーズによったりとか、ファンダーのレベルによって変わってるので、っていうところです。でも、一番はクオリティで制限してるっていうところです。あと、一応これ、YouTube のライブのレコードがあって、後でトランスクリプトを渡しすることができるのと、ジョンさんと直接の話も後でやると思います。では、次。
Thank you. Yeah, super interesting presentation. So two things you haven't really addressed, and I wonder, since you're going to start your branch in Japan, cultural and regulatory hurdles, which are potentially quite different from the US. And we know that founders, especially foreign founders in Japan, maybe they can't apply the same kind of formulas that they're used to when founding their startups in the US or in Europe.
Yeah.
And so approaching customers or dealing with VCs here is a little bit different. And maybe you've researched that.
Yeah.
And then there's the regulators, right? So in the EU, you have the AI Act that came into force, and this is going to limit some, enterprising endeavor as well. In Japan, it's also a little bit different. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to these aspects.
Yeah. And this is kind of, I guess first it's kind of still a work in progress. I mean, we're still figuring some of this out. I think that our goal is not when I came about a month ago and I went to IDS in Kyoto, and I ended up meeting a lot of both startup founders, also successful startup founders, and more people who want to start companies, investors, also people from government, also from JETRO and other sources, right? And there is, I saw kind of a common thing in Japan where it was actually, I think many Japanese investors, they think the type of they think they act in a really different way than kind of typical Silicon Valley investors. they say, oh, like even for early stage company, they say, well, oh, I need your full financial plan and projection of revenue and this kind of stuff, right? Or like, and they've kind of very much focused on the numbers. I think part of that is because many Japanese VCs, kind of their background is not as founders; they are from finance, right? And so these, but they're also, I think it's not all uniform. We actually, there's quite a few, I guess, investors who kind of, I guess, are, think a little bit in a different way. And the common theme there is that they feel like we have plenty of capital, we have plenty of money. There's not enough good companies to invest in Japan. This is like a common thought. And I think the thing that I've actually seen is sometimes with the, some of the founders in Japan, they're thinking a little bit narrow. They're thinking about, oh, how can I apply this one problem for just to only for the local market, or I'm going to take this idea that was successful in another country. I'm going to bring it to the Japan market, and like that's very it's very narrow thinking. Like the model, if you're an investor, here's like the way that like the investors think, or like at least these kind of venture capital investors, is say, okay, I'm going to give you $1 million right now, and in 5 or 7 or 10 years, you're going to give me $100 million back. So it has to be like not like double your money. It has to be, I need to get 100 times my money back. So tell me the story about like how you're going to build a company that is going to give me 100x of my return. That's the way that the kind of like, that's the kind of Silicon Valley VCs. That's the way that they think. At least 100x. It has to be a minimum 100x. It's like or 500x or 1,000x. Like that's what they're thinking of that. And so in order to do that, the only path to get there, if you're taking like $1 million, is that we are building not a regional like company. We are building a global brand. We are building something which is gonna, it's gonna be the next Google or the next Uber or the next Airbnb or the next Meta or any of those, right? You have to think like very ambitious in a very ambitious way. And I've seen kind of like that is not that common among kind of like founders in Japan that I've seen. They're often thinking much more narrow about local, about something like, and then because I think there's a selection thing that happens is that the people who are truly, truly ambitious about that, guess what? They end up like not starting their company in Japan. They go to Silicon Valley or somewhere else, right? And so the people who are left are like the ones that are maybe a little bit less ambitious. Now, I think this was like, of course, but I've also talked to a lot of people who, there are a lot of incredibly talented and ambitious people who just maybe they feel like there wasn't as much of, there's not as strong of an ecosystem. There's like, and for various reasons, maybe they want to start their company in Japan. Like sometimes sometimes it's because of family, sometimes it's because of other reasons. Like they want to end up starting their company here, but they want to start they don't want to start a small company. They want to start a big company. They're very extremely ambitious, right? And so when we're thinking about this stuff for Inception, we're not thinking about, oh, let's do this for Japanese founders, for Japanese investors in a Japanese style company. This is much more of like, let's find people who want to build the next great set of companies worldwide, right? Who want to have stronger connections to Silicon Valley and like other places in the world, and like have that level of ambition. And because they're not entirely kind of all within Silicon Valley, like there are people here in Japan that like have that same level of ambition. And so like, and can we bring them and then have them join the global community where it's just not like, hey, this is like a separate kind of Inception Japan only thing, but they're joining kind of the Inception Studio, kind of global. We have 144 founders here. We have like we do in-person events, but we also have a very active kind of online community. It's like on WhatsApp, we have an extremely active like WhatsApp groups and things like that as well, right? This is like the plan there is that that the people who are joining Inception in Japan, they happen to kind of go to the event in Japan. But and by the way, like even when we run one of these in Japan, our plan is we actually will have some founders from other places in the world also come to join here. Because the point of this is like you go on a retreat, you're supposed to like go somewhere to like change your kagaekata and like remove your distractions and change your kind of frame of reference, right? And so this is like right now we do like typically when we do this, we'll do it in the Bay Area, and like we drive 2 or 3 or 4 hours to like somewhere to knock on the hole or something, like kind of like in the countryside, like we go into Napa or we go to like in the mountains or that type of thing, right? And so now we're gonna run one of these events in Japan as well, and we're gonna do that this year. But the goal, this is not like typical Japanese founders building these typical Japanese companies to pitch to traditional Japanese investors. This is more like people who want to build the next great company. You happen to be in Japan now, or like you want to come to like the Inception Japan event. But when you're doing the pitching, yes, you're pitching to in person. There'll be some Japanese VCs, but we also have Silicon Valley VCs there, and like all the pitch coaching and all the other things that we're doing is aligned towards this. Is you're trying to build a kind of a global successful company, one on the scale of like this is at least a unicorn and beyond. Like that's what we're going for. So, yeah.
Hi, John. Thanks for the presentation. Personally ecstatic that you're here and doing this here. I think very much aligned personally with a lot of things that you described here. I think my question is just, pretty straightforward. Just like, what brought you to do this program in Japan specifically? I think, naturally, for a lot of reasons, like it's not, again, personal alignment notwithstanding, right? Like it's a place where there's a lot of roadblocks. I think a lot of like pushback against this thing. You're getting us saying stuff like, oh, this kind of power laws don't work here. The envisioning of the venture, et cetera, isn't aligned with like public market valuations and exit patterns and whatnot. And it's the same debates that I have with people like almost daily, right? So like, was it the Defro money or?
I think the honest reality of it is, yes. I mean, yeah. And there's a lot of challenges. I mean, in Japan, like doing this type of thing in Japan, and honestly, there are kind of other markets there where it kind of arguably makes more sense, right? In terms of like, obviously there's kind of like language challenges here as well, like other places where there's kind of more native English speakers, like that's a little bit easier, right? Or like culturally, there's cultural challenges here as well, right? Now that being said, so I used to live in Japan. I lived in Japan back 25 years ago, and I worked at IBM Japan, which is more like a big company, right? Big company, and it made me. And I saw like when I was living here in Japan, I was many people who are extremely talented, and maybe they doing research or they're engineers or they and they're stuck in these big like salaryman like roles, and like especially back then it was like this was 20 something years ago. It was like it used to be that like the very best people, they would go into government or to big companies, and then people who are not as good, they would go to small companies, and it was like only people who could not get a job would go start their own company. Like that's what it used to be. And it made me so sad to see this, and like, and I know there's a lot of challenges now. It's like even for, you have like family challenges where it's like, oh, like your parents will tell you, oh, like I sacrificed so much to like put you through school. Like, why are you like giving up your stable job for this crazy like dream? Like, who's going to take care of us when we're old? Like this kind of thing. These are real challenges, right? Now that being said, I mean, look, look, if what we wanted to do was optimize for kind of like let's choose the best, let's choose the group where it's going to be the statistically most likely to succeed. What we will do is like we will choose like our programs will be 100% men. It would be like all people from Stanford, and it would be like all and all like technical founders and like these type of things, right? Very short-sighted. I mean, I think this is not like that's not the right path, right? And I guess anyway, I'm a big evangelist. I have like a very soft spot for people who are kind of I feel like are through no fault of their own are like they have talent, they have ambition, they have all the pieces, but because of societal pressures or because of other things that like discrimination or other type of thing like that, that we're like they end up not being able to succeed, well, like that's like, well, you just said, well, I can't like, and this is why it's like, look, I've already had success. I already had 2 prior exits and stuff like that. Now I can do what I want, and so now it's like, okay, now it's like, look, I'm gonna like, this is why I think like I want to see like a world where it's not all the most of the company, it's not like 97% of the funded companies are all go to like all male teams, or all like almost all the funding companies, like the only way to build a company is to go to Silicon Valley, like, and be in Silicon Valley. I don't think that's not good for the world. I want the world to be in a place where it's like, yes, if you can like live in Japan and start a like world-class like AI company. Like I want that world to exist, right? And so that's part of the reason why it's like, okay, come here as well. Also, my daughter actually right now, she's part of the reason I'm here is that my daughter is actually living in Nagoya right now, right? And in fact, I'm gonna go pick her up soon, like in a couple of days, and then take her back to the US. But yeah, so we have some like connections here as well to Japan, and so they wanted to see like it help to encourage like a ecosystem here, like to develop. And it's going to take a long time. We will, but like we have to start somewhere. So it's like this is why that's part of the reason why I'm thinking about doing it in Japan.
Hi, John. My name is Max. I'm from South Africa. Thank you so much for your presentation. I just have, you spoke a lot about founders who have already started. I think a lot of people here have not necessarily started, but have some ideas in their minds.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, we've seen a lot of companies in the US, OpenAI, DeepMind, and a lot of other startups do some really interesting work. I wanted to ask, what do you think are the next set of ideas that are going to be transformative? Also considering that we might go into a depression where it's, like you said earlier, it's no longer cool to work on AI.
Yeah.
What are the next set of challenges that you think AI can change the world?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's been natural evolution. I think, so there was a big glut of companies that are kind of like basically building tools for AI. I think the reason was because a lot of the people who were starting companies they're like engineers or like AI engineers. They're the ones who understand AI, and then they say, well, what problems do I have? Oh, it's hard to use RAG. Okay, let's build a system and make it easy to use RAG. Okay, that's great. Like we need systems like that, but like there's about like 40 of them, and like there's room for maybe like 2 or something, right? So some of those get overcrowded, and so now I've seen this evolution where many of these companies have started from this type of horizontal, like, hey, we're building kind of tools and picks and shovels for this gold rush that's happening, to starting to do a little bit more kind of vertical, AI for verticals, right? It's like, hey, let's use AI, let's solve these problems in construction or in agriculture or in, or in finance, or like just a lot of more things around kind of more verticalized AI. That becomes like a lot more, there's that like I've seen this kind of shift start to happen, right? I think there is, but there are, like, to be honest, like the problem you should work on should be something that you actually genuinely care about. That's the real question, because like it's a long, like these things, it's a long road, right? That the median time to an exit, like, for any company that like doesn't shut down, the median time for them to from founding to exit is like 10.7 years. So it's like you should plan on what can I work on, what am I going to be excited enough, passionate about this problem that I can work on this for the next 10 years of my life. Because like when you're starting a company, you're trying to do it with an eye toward it being successful. If it's successful, you'll be working on this for the next 10 years. What's the problem that like you are passionate enough about, you have enough of a connection to, that like you want to work on that for the next 10 years? And like that will kind of naturally take you in the direction that like it's going to be go, because like it's like what, yes, like we're gonna have that downturn, right? And a lot of companies are gonna die, or like, and a lot of them are just gonna be like the founders are gonna give up. They'll be like, I thought I was gonna be able to get rich quick, and now it's not, doesn't seem like it. And so now I need to, okay. And then like when things get tough, and it's during that time when it's unsexy to do the AI company. Because any company you start right now, I'm pretty sure you're going to have to go through that downturn, right? The only best way to go through that downturn is like you care enough about the problem that you're solving that even when it is unsexy, you still are continuing to work on it, right? Yeah, and so that's, and so that one, and so the answer there is like different, like we have whatever, 100 people in this room, there's going to be 100 different answers for what that answer to that is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, John. Thanks for your talk today. So I have one question regarding the approach to scaling a startup, right? So you mentioned that at Inception Studio, you're looking for ideas that might go global, right?
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, like when I like on a daily life basis, I see problems around me.
Yeah.
I feel maybe AI can solve it.
Yeah.
At that time, I'm not thinking from a global perspective. I'm just thinking how I can make things better in my surrounding.
Yeah.
It may or may not scale, but that depends on like whether the PMF is achieved or not.
Yeah.
And if that model can be applied to other markets.
Yeah.
So, but is that thinking narrow or?
Well, I mean, look, there are tons and tons of problems to solve, and there are tons of like things that I can build an AI. You ever been to this website that says that there's an AI for that? And like you can go to that, right? Literally, I mean, there are tons of problems that like you can solve, and like you can solve using AI. Is that worth your time to work on? Is a real question, right? You could theoretically, you can probably come up with a list of 50 of these, right? And it's stuff that you can encounter in your own life, right? But like then it comes down to those. If you want to be like successful, like kind of that next level successful, you have to have really good taste in the problems that you're working on, and not just be, oh, I can build this, therefore I will build this. It's like, no, your time is worth a lot more than that. And so you want to, because there's a lot of different things you can work on, right? And then so this is why kind of understanding that, hey, of all the problems I can work on, this is the one I'm going to focus on because this is going after a huge problem in a huge market and like that. Like if you can, like so many times I see, hey, you completely solve a problem, you completely own some market, and that market is tiny. Like that is not, or like it's, by tiny I mean like less than multiple billions of dollars. Then there's not, like it's almost not worth your time to do. I mean, yes, you can build a sustainable business there, but your goal, like if you're on one of these paths where it's like I want to raise VC money, because there has to be that story of like I get 100x back, and like the only way you do that is by having something that's gonna like hit that level of scale. And so like just understanding like the size of the market and like the type of opportunity that's there, that will kind of naturally orient you towards like, okay, yes, I can solve this problem. Doesn't mean I should actually spend my time to do it, right? But I mean, that being said, you should, like I mentioned, you should have like a personal connection to the problem you're trying to solve as well, right? So it's like you have to find that hey, problems that you have a personal connection to, and if you solve this can actually be like go global and be like change the world and that sort of thing. So
the initial time goes more into the like identifying the market opportunity rather than building something.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's value in building in terms of like learning the technology, and this is what's possible, those type of things. Yeah, there's again, because otherwise you're going to make a bunch of projects that are like you're going to put them up on GitHub or something, and they're not going to go anywhere, right? And they're just going to be abandoned, and they're not. It's like that wasn't even worth your time to spend on. Yeah. Better to focus on the ones that's going to be like, oh, this is going to be the thing that like I want to spend the next 10 years of my life on. Like at least things that can check those boxes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So last question, because like due to the time limitation, also some Shinkansen and so JR trains have stopped due to the earthquake. So yeah, we need to. I think it's better to read by 9:30 or something earlier, so not expected. So last question.
Hi, John, Ryan. Thanks for sharing, and your views are very insightful. So I have only one question. So I was also wondering to build something, but when I try to find the problems, it always feels like a bias from my experience or
my stereotypes. So how can I avoid this kind of trap?
Yeah, I mean, so I highly recommend that, like, if you, let's say you have some interest in some industry or some area, right, is to actually spend time with the actual customers in that space, right? And actually like sit down with them and like kind of live their life with them, that type of thing. Because that's where all the insights are going to come from. And like, that's what help you kind of like break out of your own bubble. Because there's a real danger, like so startups are not like a thinking game. They're like a doing game. It's like, it doesn't matter what you think. You could sit, if you sit by yourself and you theoretically think of the perfect startup, perfect idea, perfect, like you're gonna fail. Like that's not the road to success. The road to success is actually talking to customers and understanding their problems and then coming up with some innovative solutions. And you don't do that in a vacuum, or you don't do that in a bubble. You do that by actually engaging and talking with customers, right? And so like, and so if you find yourself in this trap where you're doing that, that probably means you're just spending too much time with yourself, and like you want to find people who are going to be like your kind of target ideal customers, and then try to understand their problems and their pain. And but just realize they're not going to come up with the solutions. Like they don't know the solution space. So you want to understand their problems and then use that to generate. It's like, actually, I saw you struggling with this thing and you're wasting a lot of time and you spend a lot of money on this. I think I know a solution actually that would be 10 times better than what you're currently doing, right? And like that, I think that's where the insights can come from.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the presentation and Q&A. So yeah, until 9:30 p.m. so we can network, so interact with John also like as the audience. And so yeah, I think tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, so we are going to send an email to with like application form to Inception Studio.
Yeah.
And I think so. John prepared so many business cards to like for this event. Yeah. And so before leaving, so please make sure that you give back so this name card because Jetor is counting. So yeah, thank you for coming. Feel free to network. Also, I think we have leftovers like some food snacks.
あ、でも今、レコーディングしてるから。はい、いや、全然、後で渡しますから。